What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Gray Matters, where we come together to discuss more than just the hot topics and headlines of the day from a black man's perspective. We appreciate that we are not a monolith and every subject deserves to be explored with some nuance, giving a view from all sides of the culture. So we're here to bring you that every week with a little bit of nuance, class, and some fun. Our panel consists of three guys that are absolutely nothing alike, and you'll soon come to find out, if you don't already know, just how much we love each other in spite of our sometimes very big differences. I'm Billy Craig, joining you from the first state in the Union, Delaware. Today I'm joined by my boys Benny Wilson out near the Grand Ole Opry, and Sugar Ray joining us from Portland. Look it up if you don't know who I'm talking about. How you doing, Benny and Sugar? Good to see you guys.
Wow.
How you
I'm good,
feeling?
man. I'm doing all right. I'm hanging in there.
Yep. What's happening?
All right. Well, let's get to it.
All right. So one of the things that we pride ourselves on in the Gray Matters is having real conversations. And sometimes we gotta take a pause and like just peel back some layers and have an actual conversation about life. And that's what I wanted to have today. This kind of topic was birthed a little bit back when one of our friends, Letitia Matthews, her granddaughter was playing in the house and got shot and killed. And then we've chronicled an episode where we had our friend Mike and Mario pass away, and recently DeAndre Rogers passed away, and here in Nashville, 4-year-old girl, Talia Rogers, I'm sorry, Talia Frazier, was shot in a drive-by, like somebody shot up the car, and she passed away. So this is kind of a somber topic, but I think like this will reach the masses because I think a lot of people have this question. So the overall structure of the question is, why does God allow bad things to happen to seemingly good people, or people that don't on the surface seem to deserve it? Is kind of the overall theme. It'll probably be obviously broader than that, but that was kind of the topic that came to my mind when I was thinking about this show. And so not to force everybody to listen to Rev talk for the next 30 plus minutes or something like that, but
Yeah, say
um
that for tomorrow.
right. But no, I think it's a question that a lot of people have when it comes to church and religion and their place in God and the structure in the world is, you see in people who seemingly may not be positive but get rewarded, quote unquote rewarded, versus people who um seem to be doing the right things but seem to get punished in some fashion. So that's kind of I mean, I know it's a broad subject, and I get it. And it's a tough topic, but I just felt like people could use that right now. Because every day we click on the news, and something crazy is happening, and I figure why not? Why not us?
Mhm.
So I'll start with Rev. On this one,
Rev can take it from there, bro. You don't even have to go to me. Let's keep it 100. Let's let Rev like give a word at the end of the day. Let's let him give a word.
all right. Well, what you got for me, Rev?
Well, what's interesting is that right as we were not even a half hour ago, right when we were getting ready to jump in on this, I got a message from a friend of mine, close friend of mine. She sent me a message saying that a young man that we know named Jimmy um, just died. She just found out that he died, and it was apparently there was no like weird circumstances behind it. He went to sleep last night and just didn't wake up. Um, and what's weird about it is the way that social media is set up, the way that we communicate now, cell phones. Used to be a time where when we were younger, if you were going to talk to grandma calls you, it was a long distance call if you didn't live in town. And it was like, you had to pay money and people didn't have call waiting and, messaging in that way. You didn't get it in real time.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, people die all the time. People get in car accidents all the time. People get laid off. But until we become adults, we don't realize just how much our parents and grandparents, they literally saw this stuff all the time. It's just when we get older and become adults, you get adult real life situations. And so you start to realize, like, man, it feel like everybody around you is dying. It feel like everybody around you is getting laid off. It feels like everybody around you is going through it. One of the things that I often share, and I talk about to my wife about this a lot, is that we can sometimes lose sight of the fact that when it rains, it's not just raining at your house. It's not just raining on
It's raining down the
your.
street. It's
It's
raining
raining
across
every.
town. Yeah.
My sister, one of her really good friends, and I shout out to Stephanie. She lives in Hawaii, in Maui, and she was freaking out because the whole island seemed like it's
Right.
been on
On fire.
fire. Now, she couldn't get in touch with her, and so she was struggling. She was really anxious about it, and I was like, this is where that passage in Ephesians where it says, "Take captive every thought. Don't allow your thoughts to race away from you," because turns out she was fine because she lives up on like a mountain. She was actually housing a lot of people who were fleeing from their burning properties, but you can't get through. Kind of like 9/11, my sister who lives in Queens, I couldn't get through to her. When she finally was able to send out a text or something saying, "Hey, I'm alive, everything's okay," we just were relieved and we didn't talk to her for another week. I say all that to set it up this way. One of the things that help in times like what we're experiencing, no matter how close and personal it is to remember that, and you can't always say this in the moment because it's very insensitive when people are going through it emotionally and they're challenged with this stuff. But it's very important that we understand two things that I always remind people. One, we don't know everything. As human beings, I don't just mean we don't know the circumstances and situations. I mean, we think we're knowledgeable and we've science and advances in technology. We're actually kind of dumb as humans. Like we'll be sitting there looking at a person. Let's say, for example, somebody, and this actually, like I said, young man Jimmy. We're like, oh my gosh, what happened? He seemed to be the picture of health. Technology will allow us in 100 years, 50, 100 years, 200 years from now, technology will allow us to look back and be like, oh man, now it's clear why Jimmy died because he was on this route. His arteries were clogged, or he had an aneurysm, or whatever. We didn't scan for it, whatever it is. There's a lot of things we know now that we didn't know 200 and 300 years ago. I think about, for example, infant mortality or women who died during childbirth. There's a lot of stuff that it doesn't matter. You grieve, you go through these challenges, but we just don't know as much as we think we know a lot of times. But more importantly, it's important that we understand and get to a place where we don't take it personal. Because I pastor and minister to people, I counsel people, I coach people. A lot of times people feel like, it's not just why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? Very often it feels like, if you're God and you're all powerful, why are you letting this happen to me? Right? Why are you letting this happen?
Right.
Why didn't you? When I say bad things, I don't just mean a tragedy or a sudden death or injury or something like that, but I'm talking about, why didn't my mama love me? Why did my daddy do this for me? Why did this assault? Why did this situation? Why was I there? God, if you're in control. And sometimes we forget that we are autonomous, and it's important that we don't put things on God that don't belong to him. What I mean by that is, like, my son is 14 years old, and I refer to my kids a lot because, frankly, from a faith and theological perspective, we refer to the God, even though it's not an exact. I don't believe it's. Frankly, I don't believe. And I know I'm a bit of an island in this way. I don't believe that the relationship between us and God is something that should always be compared to a father-child relationship, even though we refer to him as Heavenly Father and that kind of thing. But it's one of those where it's to the best of our understanding, right?
So what
It's how,
should it be? So what should it be compared to?
well, I think that if I were to say, I think it's creator, but anytime, and the reason why is because number one, I feel like there can be some
So
damage when it
so
comes
how
to
does
father.
someone respond to a creator? Is
Well,
that like
that's
a but what I'm confused now because I created my children, right?
actually, but here's the thing. I'm not saying again, I'm not saying it's a horrible example. I'm saying it's an incomplete one. And here's what I mean by that.
No, I'm just asking you as
No,
the
no, no,
man,
no. That's
as
what
the
I'm telling
man
you.
that's
Okay.
that's
So here's what
allegedly
happens.
closer to God than I am.
This is the reason why I personally don't refer to the father relationship as much as the creator, and here's why.
Okay.
I have a father.
Right.
And very often the way that people view God can sometimes be hindered based on the actual physical like fathers that we have. If your
I get
father was
there's
absent,
Okay. That's
because
fair.
you're putting a feature of a person
Right.
on a
and
daddy, so it puts the
Right.
and
limitation.
So
here's
if
the
your
thing, and
father
here's
was amazing or if your father was
then
awful,
I'll give you a
it's
great
all skewed.
and I'll
Right.
give you a personal example. My father was not the most emotionally attached and emotionally available person in the world, and that's
Uh-huh.
being kind. But my father was extremely stable, responsible, and I knew in a pinch and an emergency he was going to show up. That has long, frankly, been my view of God because I've been able to recognize certain patterns.
But you just said not to look
Wait
at
a
him
minute.
as a father
I-
though.
That's why I said it's not complete because there have been times
Okay.
when I feel like God's not there. Why didn't God show up earlier? Why did he let me go through this? Going
Uh-huh.
back to the original question. And the fact is, some of the stuff I couldn't see God in the situation because I was treating him like he was Leroy Craig, not
Okay.
the creator. And the reason why, going back to the creator thing though,
Got you.
when you go to a creator, I think of it like the person who designed the Nintendo or the Sega Genesis or the person who designed a car.
Mm-hmm.
You can go back to them and ask them not only where's the manual that tells me how to operate and put this thing together. Like when you go to IKEA and you build something,
Mm-hmm.
there's instructions in there.
Mhm.
But when you go back to the creator can actually tell you this was actually my intention. So you got this shelf from IKEA that you built and you followed the instructions, but you're putting um, car tires on top of it. That's not what it was designed for. And the creator can tell you that. It don't matter how big and sturdy the shelf looks, that was not the intention. And so what you end up doing is you abuse it, which abuse is what? Abnormal use. It is not what it was intended to be done, or used for, rather. So my point is that when we look at things from a creator standpoint, we have to ask ourselves, what did the actual creator intend for this person, this relationship, people who live here, people who go through this stuff? When you go back to, and this can't possibly be exhaustive, and I'm just giving you my perspective on it. But I say all that simply to say, God doesn't always necessarily value the same things that we value. I use the example of that shelf you built that you bought from IKEA. We get mad when the shelf breaks down and act like God's not reliable when we've been putting stuff that was way too heavy on it and it didn't belong there. And so it's important that we understand that there are times, and I'll flip this around, bad things happen to good people. One of the things that I've been dealing with recently is my wife. I love my in-laws, and especially like her grandmother. Her grandmother she is everything to the Germany family. And she is 97 years old. She is in poor health, failing health. She has been, other than probably my grandmother and my parents, she has been like, she's treated me more like family than like most of my actual blood relatives. And they are mourning. They're struggling. There's a lot of people in the family that are questioning, and they're kind of got this anticipatory grief thing going on. The thing about it is, she's 97 years old. Not only has she lived a full life, and it's like I jokingly say, I talk to her about it. So I'm like, you have definitely like outrun your warranty. You know what I'm saying? Like people who get to 97 years old, I don't even care if you got the receipt. That thing done changed colors. You can't read it no more. You've gotten everything, and she has no regrets. But my point is that there are people who would look at something like that, and the fact is she's in pain. We mourn, and a lot of times when we say, why do bad things happen to good people, we sometimes lose sight of the fact that maybe if you believe in a God, maybe God was doing them a favor. I say this all the time with the whole abortion conversation where people get all up in arms, especially evangelicals, the religious right, conservative, people on the right, where they're like, oh my God, but you're taking a life and they have a salvation. I'm like, here's the thing. They didn't even have a chance to live, so they couldn't possibly have done anything wrong. So therefore, there's no way for them to run afoul of the law, run afoul of God. They're going to make it to heaven. If you believe that that's where people go, who God brings them home, they're good. They got an instant pass to heaven instead of being tortured or traumatized in a relationship with life,
with regular
and
life.
regular good life. Like we have good parents and we have good lives, relatively speaking. These are people who have parents who clearly didn't want them. So while we sit back and we question, God, why would you allow this to happen? That death, here's the thing, we're all going to face death. Whether it lasts for 3 minutes or we go in our sleep like Jimmy, or whether we have to suffer for a little while. The point is we're all going to experience death. Nobody's exempt from pain. That's why I said it's not personal. And so when we look at people who come to a tragic end, for example, sometimes we look at it from the standpoint of why did God let it happen to them? And really what it comes down to is we just have questions about why is God letting it happen to us? Because they're not in any pain anymore. They're not struggling anymore. They don't care if the car gets repoed. They don't care who wins the election in 2024. Their spirit is gone. There's nothing else for them to be concerned with. Mm-hmm. And even if they are still here, and it's not a fatal type of thing, but maybe they're just struggling or suffering. We talk about countries where people are struggling with hunger, poverty, war-torn countries, and things like that. Ultimately, we have to get, and I believe we have to get ourselves in a place where we look at it from God's perspective, which is, did God actually promise us to have a peaceful, happy existence? I'll take it back to sports. We talk a lot about sports, right? The Patriot way. Mm-hmm. Bill Belichick, for all those years, the Tom Brady's, the Teddy Bruschi's, the Ty Laws, and all the different players, the Patriot way did not guarantee that you were going to be the highest paid player in the league. It didn't guarantee that you were going to make the Pro Bowl. It didn't guarantee that you were going to be a superstar. It didn't guarantee that you were going to get to a Hall of Fame. But the one thing you knew the Patriot way was going to get you,
win.
You were going to win. And if you didn't win, like I can count on one hand the time that Tom Brady and Bill Belichick were paired up and they got blown out. Blown out, however you define it. Like we're talking high double-digit losses, right? It didn't happen. And I look at it in much the same way that sometimes our view of God is very entitled, that we feel we feel like God owes us comfort or owes us to be happy. When the fact is, that is not promised. That is not a guarantee. That's not in the instruction manual. That is not a part of the contract.
Who wrote the instruction manual?
That's what I mean, because
I'm coming from my perspective.
No, I guess I'm just saying
expectation of God is what was told to me. So God, I guess God didn't tell me what to expect of God, right? So how am I entitled? Because part of God to like provide, to bestow, to all these things that great things do, right?
And this is where I turn into Reverend Brown. Turn around, ladies. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is where I go into my preacher mode. Here's the thing, and this is my critique of especially the American westernized church, not any particular denomination or tradition in particular, but just kind of the Western mentality. There's so much emphasis on in Western religion in Western Christianity than even in Eastern Christianity. There's so much emphasis on the Bible has everything in it that there is a completely missing component of all of this, and that is the Spirit has to teach you things. The Spirit has to guide you. It is a spiritual endeavor to have faith in God. If you look at Native Americans, it was a spirit quest and a spirit walk that they were supposed to go on.
Did they believe in God or did they believe in the universe, in nature?
There is no separation between God and universe. That's why I said the Father thing. For me,
for the theology.
Yeah, I'm saying that
if you want to get down to it, yeah, you're right. If you get down to it, if you're an enlightened human, of course, what you're saying makes all the sense. But it doesn't make sense to people who are like devoutly Mormon or devoutly Catholic or devoutly Methodist or evangelical. Like, this doesn't make sense to them.
And the reason why is, frankly, I blame, it's just like in schools or like Little League sports or whatever. I kind of feel like we've given out too many participation trophies. Like, we've given too many people this idea that everybody's supposed to be winners. Everybody's supposed to be, everybody's blessed.
Well, that's our generation. That didn't happen it didn't happen until we became parents.
That's exactly right. There's this idea that everybody's entitled to this blessed life, prosperity preachers. All you got to do is pay your tithes and be committed, and you're going to have prosperity. You're going to get a house. You're going to get all your bills paid, debt, whatever. You're never going to experience any troubles. You're never going to have to deal with it. And even beyond our generation, going back years, part of what was taught so incorrectly was like people, like, if you get divorced, it's basically a causality instead of a correlation thing. So if you have trouble in life, you clearly are doing something wrong. You're clearly running you're in sin.
Okay.
And that is where
now we're getting around to where
my point is that is not the case. It's kind of like when you go to, like, I'll use the IKEA analogy again. I use it all the time. If I go to IKEA and I pick up something and it didn't have all the screws in it, it is an inconvenience for me to have to go back to IKEA, take it back, or even just go back and get, because they have a whole section. Because they know that there are going to be times when it comes off the assembly line and somebody got 2 or 3 screws missing in the box. But my larger point, going back to God, it's not a perfect analogy, but I find that too often people hold God to account for flawed human beings that just frankly just messed it up.
How does God get off the hook, bro?
I don't think he wants to get off the hook. I just think he wants to be accountable for what he does, not what my mom did.
Can't, but we this ain't God's fault. That ain't God's fault. Like, what are we doing?
Well, so my question, I mean, and not to cut Paul off there, but I think it ties together. So,
okay.
Because a lot of times, like, most of the stuff that we're, asking about or questioning is based on how we were taught. We were right. So, like, one of the things that I struggle with, and I totally forgot, one name when I was doing the introduction there. There was a young man that passed away, Jeremiah Collins. They called him J2, and seemingly, on his way to big things, and got into a car accident and his life was taken. And so this leads to this question, which is, I think a lot of people have the question of what's the lesson in this? Because
that's literally what my question was.
Yeah. So it's one of those things like where we were raised to believe if you do this or this and this, and you follow this box and check this box, good things are coming your way.
Do that, and I'm going to get my bag.
Right. And when it doesn't happen, or, then the church says, well, what was the lesson that you learned in this? What was it? But sometimes it's like, some stuff is just messed up. I was about to cut
Mhm.
on a different
Yeah. Save it for the next show.
but some
Yeah,
things
we're
are
trying to
just,
keep this one clean.
right. So, but some things are on a tragic level where it's like, what is the lesson? What is the lesson in a 4-year-old girl getting gunned down over, something her father did or didn't do, or whatever that looks like? Like, I think that's where a lot of people struggle and get off of the church bus. And I know the church bus and the God bus are two different things. But I think
Mhm.
that's where people get off the church bus is like, look, I did pay my tithes. I did go here every Sunday. I was here every Sunday and Wednesday, for Bible study, and I'm in my word and I'm doing this and that.
Mhm.
And my granddaughter is cut down in front of me. Like,
Mhm.
what's the lesson for this? Like,
So
why?
here's the question.
Mhm.
It's a two-parter, but here's the question. What makes me exempt from having to deal with life's difficulties? Why do I feel like if I check out, who taught me that if I check all the where in the Bible, since you were asking where is this instruction manual,
Well,
who does the
I
rules?
think we've all been taught that though. If you
But
do
but
right,
it
if
was
you live right, life won't happen to you.
but it was but what
Am
I'm
I
saying
correct?
is what I agree with you that we've all been taught that. I'm saying
Okay.
that is part of what is wrong with Western Christianity. It does not teach spirit. It teaches merit-based faith. There is no such thing as merit-based faith because
Transactional faith.
transactional merit-based. And here's why that is so flawed. You're
I
basically
don't have a
telling me,
problem with merit-based faith
well,
or
here's the problem.
merit-based faith. Personally,
I'm only saying that
I operate on a merit system, bro.
that's fine. Frankly, that's the American way.
Right.
Only thing I'm saying is that what merit, if we go back to Christianity, if we go back to the faith, meaning the way,
Mhm.
the actual following Christ, you're a disciple of his, you're living your life for him. If you believe that Jesus died on a cross because of your sins and your mistakes, what did you do to deserve it? The entire premise of the Christian faith is grace that was meritless. It was not
Okay.
based on something you did. And
Question.
so to teach that if you check all
Question.
the boxes,
If I'm a young kid
mhm,
who's never had sex,
mhm,
who's done everything right,
mhm,
what sin of mine did Jesus die for?
all of them. Unless you think that having sex or beating up old ladies on the street are the only sins that that you can commit. See, my point is, and
I'm
that's
just
why I'm
going by,
saying,
yeah.
that's
These are
why I'm saying.
questions. Yeah.
And this is what I'm saying. The merit-based, not only the merit-based faith and what Jesus died for, but also people have a feeling. That's why it's called, notice the question is kind of almost self-fulfilling, where it's like, why do bad things happen to good people? Why do bad things happen to bad people?
Or
Why do
Well,
good things happen to bad people?
Well, but and I think to pick up where my question was, or kind of where the topic is, when we're talking about what we were taught, in church and things like that,
Mhm.
we were taught, at least I've been taught in every church that I've ever gone to, that
you do right, you get right.
but even outside of that, like they use Job as the example,
Right.
where they
Patience.
say patience of Job, but they also mention that God was like, I have my hand on Job. I'll let you do everything to him, but you can't take his life. And
Right.
so it's like I have control, and they preach it all the time that God never took his hand off of him, so he's in control. Even when the devil was in control, God was in control, and
Right. So
he's
he
still
tortured Job.
right. So he allowed,
See, that's how I understood it.
but they constantly, at least taught in church, that God allowed it to happen.
Yeah, the
So
scriptures,
It's torture.
right. No, so I'm saying, so this is where I'm going with it though. So God allowed it to happen. So when they teach that in church, this is how we get fast forward to here. We're saying, well, somebody died. God allowed that to happen. Is because if we're supposed to be like Job and things like this, well, then God allowed this 4-year-old girl to get cut down. God allowed, J2 to get into the car accident. And so I think that's where the conversation.
So why would I mess with that guy?
Right. There we go.
Why would I even rock with
But are you
that has let so much foul things happen to me and mine. Why
what
would
is
I even?
so here's the question then, right?
Mhm.
What is the alternative?
So you want me to go take some money out of my check and go to a building and you give them some money up out of my check and pray to them, even though
No,
all this bad stuff has happened?
what I'm saying is, what is the alternative to bad people? Like, what are we gonna do with all the bad people? Just kill them? Kill them in the womb? Like, just
Well,
don't
but I
even let
think
them have a chance to get out and
but
create
there's an
havoc?
assumption that bad people get what they deserve. If something bad happens to a bad person, then
They
they got what they
don't.
deserve.
Right.
They don't.
It,
No, I'm just saying, like, as an overall,
so why should? So what's the point of being righteous?
Because that's what the manufacturer and the creator of the product, that is what the intended purpose was.
But that's not what the intended. That's not what happens with most of the people who the product designer. Like, you understand what I'm?
No,
Most
I
of the
understand
toys don't
exactly what you're
act the
saying.
way that
You're
most of the
saying Here's
toys
what I'm
don't
saying.
behave in that manner, bro.
And what I'm saying is that coming off the assembly line, them toys were not broken. People play with them and break them.
They act as intended.
No, I'm saying coming off the assembly line, those toys were not broken.
So God makes mistakes.
People break toys. Those toys were not broken.
So people break themselves.
Absolutely. That is the whole like Torah. That's the whole first 5, books of the Old Testament. That's pretty much
So
what
you
it
don't
is.
believe that God makes broken people. You believe people break themselves.
I don't believe anybody's broke. Even people who are born with genetic defects, we might call them, or mutations, more scientifically appropriate. I don't believe those are necessarily mistakes, because I can look at plenty of people in my family. Um, I have I have a brother-in-law who's special needs. My sister, my wife's brother. And here's the thing: dealing with somebody who has special needs is actually a way that I've really grown and developed in my compassion and my patience. I'm sorely lacking in patience, and so it helps me. My point is to look at a creation and look at it as a defect, because it is not exactly the way that we expect it to be. I have no idea why the creator made that toy that way. It doesn't mean that they're going to be able to do all the things that the rest of the toys can do, because it's not designed to do that. My only point is that I don't believe that we have enough information about humans, human behavior, genetic makeup, all these types of things. Like, why do you get dictators over in Africa that are, these war-torn
Like
countries every
there's a
10
bunch
years?
of books about all of this type of stuff, though, bro.
Exactly. And my point is, and frankly, going back to what you were originally saying, I don't believe that the Bible is the only place to get answers. And I don't believe that was ever the intention. That is not, it's like IKEA gives you the book and says, build it this way, put it here, it's useful for your living room. And then it's like, well, it didn't say you could put candles on it. Did it have to? Like, did it really?
but
Don't we
I'm
know
thinking,
enough about the universe to understand that it can only, if it says it can only handle 50 pounds of weight, don't put 120 pounds of weight on it? Like, that's the kind of stuff where I feel like we've been taught wrong. And sometimes we're afraid to say we've been taught wrong by my parents were great people. They taught me certain things wrong. It doesn't mean that God was wrong. It doesn't mean that God gave me bad parents or that they were defective. It means they did the best they could. I believe they put in a good faith effort, but they were in fact not perfect teachers. They were not perfect operators of said machine or whatever was designed. And so, getting back to the original question of bad things happen to good people, I think sometimes we have this thing where we think that God intends for everything to work kind of like a machine, like we put the batteries in and it works. And I don't think that that's always how God works. Like you said, the lesson, if we're looking for the lesson in our lives, through our marriages, through our relationships, through our jobs, through injuries or different traumas that happen, if we're really looking for the answers, sometimes we have to be willing to arrest our preconceived notions, our previous thoughts on it. Otherwise, we can't see it because we're too stuck on it's supposed to be this way. That 17-year-old of that basketball player that you were talking about earlier, Andre.
Oh, yeah.
Caleb White, right?
Mm-hmm.
Caleb White shouldn't have died at 17. Why not? Who said he has to live? Like I was telling you about my wife's grandmother. She's 97. Do I feel like she's going to be cheated because she's likely not going to make it to 100? Well, nobody says that. Well, who's to say that Caleb White got cheated because he made it to 17 and didn't make it to 20? These are predetermined things because we have it in our mind that if a 17-year-old got cheated, a 4-year-old who got down got cheated, or
do
something.
Bad things happen to good people?
Absolutely,
or do things just happen?
I believe things happen to anybody, good and bad.
Because I don't believe anybody's good or bad. I don't believe any human being is either good or bad in any capacity.
I agree with you 100%. And I feel like that is the same for Desmond Tutu and Mother Teresa as it is for Jeffrey Dahmer.
Oh, if you do enough digging, Mother Teresa was a horrible human being.
And if you do enough searching back in the history, I can show you where a person like a Jeffrey Dahmer went off track. Like, there's a lot of people that fail you along the way.
Gandhi's another one who was a horrible human being.
Awful. Okay. Now, my point is that
these are people we're supposed to revere.
And I'm saying, who told us we had to revere them?
Right?
People put that pressure on me as a preacher and a pastor, where it's like, you're supposed to, man, don't do that to me. I haven't been a preacher my whole life, and certainly you do not need to live your life with the expectation that I am always going to be able to set an example.
Wait till the Martin Luther King tapes come out.
Wait, we know enough already.
But they're supposed to come out, I want to say in the next like a year or two, maybe 2-3 years. They're all the stuff's supposed to come out.
I think it's 25. It's 2025 or 26, something like that. Yeah.
But is the church the one? I know this is a loaded question, but is the church the one that's getting it wrong then? Because when I go and listen, they hold up the Bible and say, this is your instruction manual, much like you were talking about IKEA. And they say, this is the instruction manual. Now you said, you can use other sources as well, which I'm not saying this is my personal belief. I'm saying these are the questions that people that are watching this show are going to ask. Yeah. So when we go to church and they say, hey, this is your instruction manual, read this from cover to cover, learn it, do all the things that it says that it's supposed to be,
they're wrong
here. And so
they're
the
wrong.
church.
And a good friend of mine, shout out to Trey, one of my best friends. We grew up next door to each other. Me and Trey, we go back. And he told me one time, he was so surprised because I told him, I said, you know who one of my favorite human beings is? And I follow him, I read, I pay, like, all he got to do is be there and I'm going to pay attention. Neil deGrasse Tyson. And the reason why is because, I'm kind of one of those knowledge junkie type peoples.
You a closet nerd. Go ahead and say it.
I ain't no closet to it, man. I'm out the closet.
We all are. Let's be honest.
We all
didn't go to public school. Nobody's public school educated.
And so my attitude towards knowledge is a little bit different than most. But I say that only to say, he is not someone who has the same understanding, or we'll say this, he doesn't identify God or a creator in the same way that I do. That does not change the fact that, frankly, I rely on a lot of what I've heard him explain about the universe beyond the Earth surface and stuff like that, beyond our atmosphere. I rely on his explanations and what he has taught. Not that his gospel is perfect. I mean, we ain't never been there, but I rely on that to frankly help me make sense of what God expects for us on this planet. And I think that unfortunately, where the church, if we really want to go back through history, the church, the Western church in particular, has made the mistake of making the boogeyman out of science. That has made, frankly, Western Christianity way less spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
The instruction manual should be teaching you how. It's kind of like my trainer, my when I first really got into bodybuilding, Jeff Long, call him Box, down in Atlanta. Shout out Box. Um, he taught me a lot about bodybuilding, how to understand my diet, how to get my body right, how to compete. At one point, he was ranked like top 6 in the world. I remember he did the Olympia, and I think he got in on the wild card. Like, he's very accomplished. Same thing here in Delaware. Doug Dolphin, he's my trainer here. These are very accomplished men, but they can only give me instruction so that I can finish taking it the rest of the way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I still have to know my body. They can't do the work for me. They can't lift the weights for me. They can't eat for me. They can't, their carb level that they have to take is going to be different from mine. And I think that too often we try to reconcile with the uncomfortable spaces of why did this, we call it, like Paul said it perfectly. It's not even that it's a good or a bad thing. An uncomfortable, painful thing happened, and I'm having a difficult time reconciling it. And no matter what it is, we as human beings always seek to find blame, responsibility, and accountability.
Yep.
And
Well-
too often we put that on God or the church or whatever. Not that it doesn't belong to the church or it doesn't belong to God. God may have directly been, like you use the example of Job, he directly got involved. But even if you look at the Job story, and I don't want to go off into the weeds on this, that story was designed to be an example, much the same way if I showed you a play from Louisville playing Cincinnati in a game, and this is a play that Lamar Jackson ran and this and that and whatever, that doesn't mean that you're going to be expected to execute that play exactly like he did. I'm showing you how the play developed, and I'm giving you window. That's why we do film study. These are not designed for you to replicate it exactly. And too often, I think we look at the Bible and think, well, it says right there, that's the incorrect way to even digest the word of God. It's not designed for you to carry it out verbatim. It is designed just like what Box and just like what Doug do for me. They're helping me develop my shoulders. They help me develop my, quads or something. There are certain exercises going to stimulate one in a way that is not going to do the other. It's important that, frankly, I tell people this all the time, and then I'll wrap it. I generally, just like I said, I view God as, and I talk about him and refer to him more as a creator than father because of how problematic sometimes those relationships can be. And I teach my kids this all the time. I tell them, I don't tell people that there is good or bad, sin and righteousness in that classic sense. I tell people all the time, ask yourself this: are you doing something that is healthy versus something that is unhealthy? Healthy is, are you doing something? Are you living a certain way that the creator designed for it to do, as opposed to I'm abusing it because I'm using it for a purpose that it wasn't intended? That is how we look at healthy and non-healthy. And in the same way, when we look at bad things and good things that happen, I don't even look at it as bad things and good things that happen, because somebody dies. There was that movie 7 Pounds, where you remember that, Will Smith, and shout out to Rosario Dawson. I love her. But anyway, the point is, the whole idea of, well, something horrible happened. Hey man, listen, I am a work in progress. But his death, while his family and his brother in particular, different people mourned, it gave another person sight. It gave another person something else. So for you, it was a tragic accident that led to this. For another person, it was a blessing. And that is where we have to be able to reconcile, not in a good or a bad space, but a healthy or an unhealthy space. Just my perspective on it, because there's nothing that's going to, like Letitia, there's nothing that's going to take her grief away ever. As long as she's breathing, she is going to mourn the death. And shout out to Letitia. I mean, like, that was horrible by any account, because it causes us pain, and she's in a lot of pain. That pain is not going to go away. That doesn't mean that God intended for something bad, because we don't even know what good could come out of that situation. It may not come out of it for her. It may not be something that she will ever be able in this lifetime to understand and appreciate. It doesn't mean that God was not very intentional and purposeful. It could be that he didn't want that boy to suffer. He didn't want that girl to go through what she was ultimately going to go through. And we can't forecast that out, but we question God because, frankly, he's the punching bag. He's the easy, person to go after.
Well, I mean, I think it's the nature of humans to put things in a box. Like, there has to be
somebody's got to be to blame.
Yeah, there's got to be a hero and there's got to be a villain. Like,
that's right.
And but yeah, no, I mean, I think it's just an unfortunate. Like, I try to have normal words for it, but it's just like there's a lot of unfortunate things that happen that hurt to the core. And you want to say that person didn't deserve that. Mm-hmm. Like, and for the most part, I still feel that way. Like, I feel like Mario lived a life good enough that he didn't deserve to die at a truck stop. Alone.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right. But but I get what you're saying. Like, but it doesn't make it, like, I guess for the purpose of this conversation, for people listening, it doesn't make it like suck any less. Like, it's like, it still hurts the same. And we're not having this conversation to provide answers, like the actual answer or solution. Mm-hmm. It's just to have the talk track that a lot of you have to get not necessarily understanding, but peace.
You said it
well. To know that you're not alone.
Yeah, right. Because
nobody has any of the answers. The questions you have, we all have those same questions.
The way I often put it, to your point,
we all yelling at the sky. We all
and
doing
ultimately, what helps us find relief is not getting the conclusion. The conclusion is not going to be reversed. Like, the call's not going to get reversed on the field. There is no review. There is no, we're going to pick up the flag. What's done is done. But what often helps, and the reason why these types of conversations are helpful, is because we have to be willing to provide each other the conversation and, frankly, the vocabulary
and room.
I was about to say, in the space. Yeah.
We got to give people the space to be able to talk these things out without shaming them or making them feel like, well, if you would just give it over to the Lord. Stop that.
Man, miss me with
Please
that.
Stop. Please miss me with
fire
that.
out you talking to me.
Right. Like, and you know,
philosophical pie in the sky cliche type stuff, man. Don't do that.
Oh, well, on the other side, I'm not on the other side of glory. I'm here, and I'm dealing. I'm a widower, or I've lost my best friend, or fill in the blank.
My daughter, my mom, my dad, my wife, whatever.
And
my
you
brother,
said it perfectly,
my sister.
Paul. We have to give people the space, the vocabulary, and frankly, give them the time. We be like, man, but your mama been dead for 6 months. Well, your son died a long time. Are you serious? Bruh. That hole don't get
that
filled.
Part annoys me beyond belief. While we wrapping this, because like my wife's mom passed of pancreatic cancer. Okay. And this was before we ever met. So it's been close to 20 years at this point, I believe. And the other day, I walked in the kitchen, and I thought I did something because she was sitting there crying,
having a whole meltdown,
having an entire meltdown. It didn't have anything to do with me. Didn't have anything to do with the kids or anything like that.
Mama.
That's it.
And in that moment, especially.
And we talking, 20 years ago, and people are like, man, you should definitely be over that by now. And it's like, but who are you to put that time limit on that? Like, that's me in the church have fights about that constantly, just because it's like, like, grief is a process. Okay, you should be over that process by now. Like, they put clocks on it eventually, and it's just like, that's not it's going to hurt her to the day that she passes away. Just like you said with Letitia, like that, it's going to hurt until she passes away. And it is going to continue to go down that, that path. My brother right now is struggling with the passing of Jeremiah Collins, like J2, where I'm here for him, but at the same time, it's like the one unfortunate,
that's right,
but fortunate thing is that life continues to go on. Football season continues to go on. And the reason I bring up football season is because J2 was about to be a freshman, or he was a freshman at Austin P on the football team. And you're forced to continue on with life, even though something tragic happened. But that doesn't mean that you have to forget about that person or forget about that circumstance, even though life has continued to go on. And I think that's the hard part of where people struggle is I'm grieving, and
I don't have time to even.
My mortgage is still due.
Yeah.
And I got to go back to work eventually. And the lights got to be paid. And life continues on and it doesn't stop, even though you desperately need it to.
And that's why I began by saying the best that I can offer is that if God did not promise you that we were going to have these comfortable, like life was going to be in a straight line, everybody's going to get 75 years. And, if God did not guarantee or promise that or put that in the contract, so to speak, then it's unfair to expect or hold him to this expectation because Andre told me that, or the preacher told me that, or my mama told me that. We need to leave room for the fact that your mama did the best she could, but she didn't. She was wrong, and so was Reverend Jones, and so was whoever, and so was Billy Craig when he get up there and preach. That man meant everything he said. He meant it from the best place. But you know what? God's grace is gonna have to be sufficient for me because I'm not perfect, and sometimes our expectations. And again, let me just say that I will offer this advice and I will say this with great vigor and conviction. Do not offer a grieving person anecdotes and solutions and timelines. And I understand you. No,
or what worked for you.
Let me tell you how it worked for me.
We don't care what worked for you.
If they did not ask you, grief is something that, frankly, it vexes me. It actually causes me to be angry when people do not respect other people's space when it comes to grief. That doesn't mean you can't show compassion. If you need something, I'm here for you. Whatever I can do, I don't know.
Facts.
I can't, that kind of thing.
Those are the limits of your conversation.
That's literally that need until and because here's the thing: none of us, for the most part, most of us aren't paid psychiatrists. We haven't unwrapped a mind. We haven't taken the time. We haven't done the work. We don't know how to actually. It's like a surgeon, like I can't do a heart surgery. I can't land a plane. There's things I can do. That's not one of them. Most of us are not grief counselors. So we need to stop and really direct people to where they can get qualified help. That being said, it's just one of those things where bad things happen. If we're using the term bad things happen to good people, because bad things happen to bad people. Bad things happen to all people. None of us are exempt. None of us are going to make it out of here alive. None of us are going to make it out of here without tragedy. None of us are going to make it out of here without some trauma. Everybody's going to be hurt by somebody. Everybody is going to experience a loss. Everybody's going to feel like they deserve something and put in the work for something and not get it. This is not something that we can avoid, nor do we always have to have an answer for everything. We have this, America's bad for that. We got to put a bow on everything. We watch too many movies where there's always a conclusion. We always have an answer. That's not real life. Sometimes your dad is going to die before you get the answer that you were looking for, and you're going to have to live not ever knowing the answer. Some things are just that way. That's life. And we have to not be happy with it, but we have to be okay in the general sense that sometimes life is that way. We don't always get the answer we want. So that's the best I got to offer.
Rev then gave a word.
Listen, honestly, That's, to be totally honest with you, and I don't know who's listening, but that's
Everybody.
not that's 90% of what I do. And a lot of times people look at some of these prosperity preachers and these big time mega churches and stuff like that. The cats like me, churches with 100 or less people, like people be looking like, oh, well, you ain't doing it big and you ain't got a mega church and you ain't, they don't understand. That's not what I'm in it for. I'm here for people who are hurting. I speak to more people who are recovering addicts, who are survivors of assault and abuse, than I talk to people about money. Most of the people that I'm talking to are people who are dealing with, I have to reconcile, how can God say that he loves me and my granddaughter was killed? Or my wife divorced me after 20 years and I've been nothing but good and faithful to her. What happened? Like, we literally, that's what I deal with, because that's actually the work. For me, that's my journey. That's the work. And so I hope more people will understand that God, it's okay that people taught you wrong. Just go out there and seek the right answers instead of staying mad. All right. If you are listening to us on one of our streaming platforms, then that sound that you just heard means that we are ready for the APB. And I got it this week. And this is going to be very broad and general, but I believe it will get right to the point. I'm looking for people who are willing to put their emotions aside and their feelings aside for the moment to show compassion. Whenever we have these deep type of conversations or complicated conversations about loss and trauma and struggle and why does God do certain things, sometimes we can't get past ourselves long enough to just let that person go through what they're going through. No judgment, no shame, no shade, no, you should be over, you should be dealing with it. The compassion that we want when we're going through things, sometimes it looks like, man, just let them talk. They may even be doing some things that you don't approve of. They're working it out. Support somebody, have compassion for somebody without them having to live up to and meet your expectations. And so my APB is really short and sweet. It's, Andre says this a lot, where it's like, just be good people. Well, more specifically than just being good people, be a person that doesn't feel like everybody has to measure up to you when they're going through crisis. Everybody around you is going through something. Even if it's not actively going through something, they have gone through something. I appreciated what you shared even about your wife and what Jackie was going through. Like, that was 20 years ago, but she was having a moment. And for you to walk in there and be like, well, where are my waffles at? I understand, but your mom been gone for the... No, have enough compassion to look past yourself, because that's really what we need, is a less judgmental society, a less impatient society, and a society that's willing to be like, you know what? Yeah, actually, I'm just going to let them have this time. It's not about me. Put your emotions aside, put your personal feelings aside, put your religion and doctrine aside, put your worldview aside,
partisanship,
your politics, your race, even. Put all of those things aside. You can do it for a moment, and it goes a long way, and it really is a reflection of what you say that you believe, whether you truly believe it or not. So that's my APB. I'm looking for people with compassion that are willing to put their emotions on the back burner for somebody else. Make that sacrifice in that moment.
And to piggyback off that real quick, one other group of people that we need outside of, when we putting things aside, put your comparison aside too. Because if I'm coming to you to have a conversation about something I'm struggling with, the last thing I want to hear is you try to one up me in that conversation with what you struggle with.
Let it be about me. Let me have my moment.
That's all.
Don't Kanye be like, wait, I'm gonna let you have this, but real quick,
I had the worst day of all time.
Right. I'm gonna let you have it back, Paul, but let me tell you about when I went through this thing.
Right.
it's selfish, and we need to be less selfish about that, because
Well, we was talking about that with the giving people flowers episode.
yep,
Absolutely.
we
Yeah.
can't let people have a moment. Let them have a moment. Put your
Yeah.
emotions aside.
Let
That's
folks
great,
live.
Andre. Yeah, that's
Let
great.
them live.
All right. Well,
Normally
that's a
that-
wrap for the Gray Matters this episode. We thank you for listening. We want to especially thank all of our people who have subscribed and are following us. We want to continue to ask for your support in that way. If you got comments or questions, feedback, things that you would like to talk to us about, ask us. If you got ideas for show topics, then we are welcoming that at all times. I want to say thank you once again for our faithful fans and people that follow us. We look forward to seeing you next time, and be blessed.
Peace.
So a preacher, a stay-at-home dad, and a rapper walk into a bar. I am my ancestors back from the grave, no longer a slave, beat to the God's meal, pray surviving my day. A threat to society, cause Malcolm showed me the way. I'm young, black, intelligent. Oh, now they afraid. It's too late, I am the king, I am the spark to the brain. I am the light that fought the dark and now you're seeing the rain. I am the thing they spent their whole life killing. To find out, I am the rose that grew from under their building. This ain't for likes, this is a fight so you can open your mind. Peel the scab back, reveal the blood and see what we'll find. I promise. Like LeBron, I am just one of a kind. No longer will I accept the blind, leading the blind. Keep it a buck, say what I want, not giving a screaming afterward like Pac until the day my heart stops. And when I do, remember when I take my last breath, just remind the tape and witness all the knowledge I left the grave. So I said, a preacher, a stay-at-home dad, and a rapper walk into a bar. The Gray Matters.